Hi everyone, Shafiq here. Welcome to another edition of Founders Forum, where we answer questions submitted by founders and innovators like yourself. But before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel somewhere right here, as well as click on the notification bell so you can gain immediate access to the latest episodes of our acclaimed show where we help founders by answering critical questions related to systematically building your startup. Whew, that was a mouthful. All right, hey Steven, are you ready with our first question?
Hey there, Shafiq. I'm ready to roll with our first question right here, and it comes from Mark of mygoodroof.com. But before I get to Mark's question, I do want to let everyone know one thing. Look, guys, we love receiving questions from founders and innovators like y'all, and we noticed a couple of you have asked us whether we would mention your name and/or your startup when we discuss your question, which is really cool. So, in response to this, we've made a slight change to the form in which you submit a question. We've included the ability for you to opt in to allow us to do just that. We want to make sure we have your permission rather than just assume that's okay. So now you don't need to feel like you have to select that option. We'd love it if you do, but we also recognize that some questions are best left to being anonymous. So let's return back to Mark's question. He wrote, if I am in the beginning phases of starting a company, but it's just me, what is the best way to get connected to individuals who could join the project? He notes that most good innovations occur in teams, so what is the best platform or vertical to find those who could be interested?
Okay, well, when looking to collaborate with potential team members, you have to be able to give them a reason to want to help you. And if you're just starting out, then that reason can't just be because you pay them. Those are not really the kinds of initial recruits you want. So if paying is the only reason they join you, then your interests and theirs are not aligned. And what do I mean by that? Well, most successful founders have figured, they have one trait in common, and that is when it comes to attracting talent, they're really good at communicating how the problem they're trying to solve and how by solving it, they're going to change the world. In other words, they kind of have that whole communication thing down, right? So I'll use Steven's man crush, Elon Musk, as an example. Yeah, Steven, don't get excited. So most people believe that Elon Musk and Martin Eberhard were the ones who came up with the concept of building a fast electric car that would be better than an internal combustion engine. Well, would it surprise you to learn that neither did? What both Elon and Eberhard have in common about the origins of Tesla is that both were looking to build an electric car for the same reason. And that reason was they wanted to stop the pollution caused by internal combustion engine transportation. But they didn't know if it was possible. And they both had stumbled onto AC Propulsion, a company out of San Dimas, California. Tom Gage of AC Propulsion Systems, along with his partner, Alan, if I get the name right, Kokachny, had already built the T0, which went from 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds and had a range of 300 miles. So both Elon and Martin knew what they wanted to do was technically feasible. And they both got to know about AC propulsion because they were both trying to solve the same problem. And their network introduced them to AC propulsion. So how did Elon and Martin meet? Well, they can both thank and forgive Tom Gage for connecting Elon to Martin. I only say thank and forgive because some years later, Elon and Martin had a huge and very public falling out. So, Mark, the answer that you can find great teammates by one, effectively learning how to communicate the problem you're trying to solve, and then finding the knowledge community that can help you solve the problem. So in Elon's case, he and Martin were plugged into the local universities, which allowed them to understand the leading edge of transportation transformation. There were projects out of Stanford that were focused on trying to build an electric car. So showing up at these knowledge community events will help you make the right connections. You'll have to check your local market for that. And I know, how can you network in the age of COVID? Well, COVID is not going to last forever. And in the meantime, you have work to do. You have to figure out how, if the problem you're trying to solve is real and is technically feasible. Remember, both Martin and Elon knew what they wanted to do was technically feasible because of AC propulsion. And so you have to kind of network around and say, okay, I'm trying to do X, and here's the problem, and here's how I'm trying to solve it. Is this even possible? And in this case, both of them were looking to solve the pollution problem by converting the internal combustion engine into an electric motor, which of course would have zero emissions. So, they needed to know that that was technically feasible, that they could in fact do, make an electric motor that could be, driven on batteries and give the same kind of results as an internal combustion car. So now in case you already know the problem you're solving and have spent time developing an effective way to talk about it, the problem, and you're already at that point, then it's technically feasible to solve the problem, then you can use LinkedIn to find like-minded entrepreneurs. Use LinkedIn to create communities around the problem you're solving. So that might be like creating a group or plug it into existing groups. For instance, if you were trying to learn about startups, there's plenty of startup groups. Or if you're trying to learn about clean technologies, there's plenty of stuff around clean technologies. Lots of LinkedIn groups where professionals, talk about problems and do posts and query each other. So you will solve, by creating that community, you'll solve two of your challenges at once. One, you will attract customers who suffer from the problem. And two, you will likely attract talent that wants to help you solve that problem. And that's assuming the community already doesn't exist. If it does, just join it, right? So a regular post describing the problem and the technical challenges you have to overcome will help you attract the right audience. And if you scan your news feed on LinkedIn, you can see people asking interesting questions every so often with specific hashtags to engage others who may have insight about the question that they want answered. So people who answer become your target to connect and start the conversation. So Stephen, you're our social media butterfly. Can you add your thoughts about how to network on LinkedIn and on Facebook?
Yes, I can. But let me explain by sharing something that you and I do during our in-person meetups. Now, one suggestion that we had, that we implemented during our events, was to get people to stop talking about their startup ideas when networking with other founders. And I thought our approach was quite clever and effective in that we told founders to introduce themselves to people they didn't know and tell those people about the problem they wanted to solve, as well as who had that problem. By shifting their focus to discussing the problem instead of the solution, these founders were able to have much more robust conversations and network to find others who were interested in solving the same problem or similar problems. So not only did founders regularly message us now about how much they missed that networking time, at the time, I remember you and I talked about this, we could actually tell that this networking approach worked really well by watching how many founders would participate in networking and how well they would score it in our post-event surveys. So likewise, as you've hinted at, founders can find others online who share the same passion by joining Facebook groups focused on the issue that your startup is focused upon and discussing the problems related to that. And also, as you mentioned, founders can search hashtags on LinkedIn related to a topic or a problem their startup is trying to solve. LinkedIn's actually pretty fantastic about that. Now, we do get this question that comes up quite often with us. For those who are worry about sharing their idea with someone who's also interested in the same problem, you shouldn't fear someone stealing your idea because you're really focused on discussing the problem itself and not how you plan on solving it. If anything, you're more likely to accelerate your understanding about the problem you intend to solve by speaking with others who care passionately about the same topic, which as an added benefit can lead to new teaming opportunities, just as Shafiq mentioned. So being passionate about a topic and having somebody who's passionate as well, there's really some synergies that come through there. Okay, Shafiq, we have our next question here, and it comes from a pair of first-time founders whose consumer packaged goods startup is in the middle of market validation. And this question comes from one of the co-founders. As she writes, I'm debating with my co-founder what's the fastest way to validate whether our messaging is working. Which one do you recommend? Ads on Google, Facebook, or Amazon?
Well, I might have a surprising answer here. None of the above. If you're trying to see if your messaging is working by performing the testing using an online test, then you're going to waste a lot of time and money. And the reason is because you're lacking control over several variables that you have to manage as you do your testing. So the first variable is the target market demographics that accurately exposes the ad to your defined target customer segment. And yes, all these platforms allow you to pinpoint the audience, but the first time out when you're trying to figure out how to configure each tool to only select the target demographics, you'll encounter several false starts. So you're not really sure if you're getting the right audience is the basic point there, right? And then second variable is the message that you're testing itself. When you do get a click, you have no way to determine if your ad actually activated your target audience or was activating members who are not in your target segment and don't have the problem, but respond because you use provocative imagery to gain the click. So, and we see founders when they're testing trying to do all kinds of things just to simply get people to respond. So, and what I mean by that is that did you run the equivalent of a beer commercial, with Swedish ski team wearing bikinis on a bus? That kind of marketing works for beer companies, but likely will not work for you. The third variable, the non-clicks, you have no way to determine why they did not click on the ad in the first place. So what you'll notice is that your click-through rate or CTR is very low, which in turn is going to cost you more per click because Google and Facebook know that they will have to display your ad to many more people than others competing for the same demographics that you're targeting. And therefore, they will jack up the price you'll have to pay in order to show your ad. That is why we recommend performing the message validation testing as a manual test. All the platforms are in a sense automated. Only after you have proven message, then you should try and run the ad online. Stephen, would you like to add your thoughts to this?
Yeah, I do want to touch on a few things. While Google and Facebook do offer advertisers a choice to pay based on the number of ad impressions, most likely an advertiser, such as the person asking this question, will choose to pay a cost per click or CPC, as that typically lines up the action of the person who saw the ad with the actual interest in the ad as reflected by the click, which is something you're hinting at. Now, of course, this does mean that your click-through rate is a key metric in understanding whether your messaging is effective or not. And to reinforce what you said, this is also why manually testing your message first before burning up your ad budget is really important. So since we talk about manual testing, let's give a couple of examples of this, because it can take a couple different forms, but let's give some examples. So one example, if your startup idea relates to, say, an app for dog lovers, you could set up a sign at the entrance of a popular local dog park and count with a clicker how many people walking by read the ad or ignore the ad. You can track that. Or if your startup idea relates to a product, such as something for a do-it-yourself car mechanic, you could hand out flyers outside of an auto parts store and see how many are interested in your offer based on that interaction. Now, there's one last thing I do want to highlight here. Shafiq's feedback is clearly focused on startups in the market validation phase, where hustle is really what's super important and needed for messaging validation, rather than just firing off ads at will and seeing what comes back. All right, one last question here, and this one comes from an entrepreneur who's on his second startup. In his original startup, he had some success running a Kickstarter campaign. He got it funded and exceeded his campaign goal, but he struggled to gain traction afterwards. So he's back, and for this latest startup, he's focused on a skincare product. And his question is, in the last episode, you discussed having a defined customer segment that is narrowly tailored initially. I've been able to identify two narrow customer segments during customer discovery. Does this mean that I need to develop two separate messaging and placement plans? Can you explain why or why not?
So I guess the short answer is yes. You'll have to develop two separate messages and placement plans. And the reason is because trying to target both narrow segments will make your messaging unnecessarily long. So why is that? Because more than likely, both segments have a very different use case when the problem arises, which of course, you kind of like, in order to make the message effective, you have to kind of be able to put them in a situation when they would arise a problem, so they self-identify with it. And then they have different existing alternatives to solve the problem and have likely very different ways of conceiving of what the solution is. In other words, the solution vision is different. So as an example, let's say you have I guess like, let's say you have a really awesome tasting salt, okay, that enhances the flavor of food. And let's say that through customer discovery, you figured out that both restaurants and stay-at-home moms are the two narrow segments you can easily target because you have reach into those segments, right? So developing a common message for both groups as well as potential solution packaging is not really possible. Even though you have the same underlying solution for both segments, how your solution is sold and packaged is vastly different for each target segment, the restaurant and the stay-at-home mom. So like, for example, showing a bulk salt package to a stay-at-home mom in an ad is not going to make her want to purchase or click or learn more about that salt. Nor is showing a prepackaged small plastic salt hand grinder going to move a chef. So the messaging really has to be, has to anchor them in their experience, not the other segment's experience. And having one common message is just going to dilute it for both. So your solution will be useful, and the other side of it is the solution is useful for one and not the other segment. So since they both have different existing alternatives and understanding the problem differently, I'm sure you can mash up and tell a very generic story, but likely neither segment will respond. But the key here is for an ad to be effective, it must be super concise and to the point. Also, the placement will be different for both segments. You'll not be effective reaching stay-at-home moms by going to the local fresh food markets where restaurant chefs go to purchase their fresh supplies daily. So you can't just throw up either a sign up there or like a flyer to see if you can get, or even pass out flyers to people coming in to shop at that market. And you won't find the same chefs at a local grocery store where moms show up every week. So as a matter of fact, there are no problems where the exact same solution packaged exactly the same way can serve every market segment, and they all have the same existing alternatives. So for all those reasons, your message just simply won't be effective, and neither will your placement be, trying to reach two segments with one ad and one set of placement. And that's why you have to kind of like work each one in turn. Stephen, would you like to add your thoughts to that long explanation that I gave?
Yeah, actually, I thought you were pretty on point. So, I really agree on your feedback. What was coming to my mind is that it seems to be that founders often want to double dip by leveraging one message across multiple target customer segments. And this can really be due to a founder's worry that by focusing on only one market segment, they'll lose their ability to sell to those other segments altogether. Now, unfortunately, that viewpoint, that approach often results in confusion with both customer segments as the founder attempts to bifurcate their message, just as you gave as an example with the salt example that you spoke about. So in that case, the founder really has two options. They can develop and run a distinct campaign separately for each of the two customer segments, as you suggested, or they can choose what the data is showing as their first best customer segment and run their campaign targeting that segment first if they are budget constrained. Now, with either option, a founder will eventually test the other segment or segments later during the repeatable sales and delivery phase in preparation for executing their scale strategy. So having interest in reaching two or more customer segments will not be wasted. And that's really the most important thing that I really want founders to think about. It's liberating to know that what you see as an opportunity is not going to go to waste for later. Okay, everyone. As a reminder, in addition to our regular incubator process, we're offering a special cohort for our incubator coming up. If you have ever tried to run a Kickstarter campaign and failed, or had a successful campaign but failed to continue selling your product post Kickstarter campaign, just as the experience was for the last person who sent a question in for us, or you're thinking about running a brand new Kickstarter campaign, especially this fall or next spring, you're going to want to apply to LeanMastery Incubator by August 15th so you can join our Kickstarter cohort. Spots are limited, and we are using a rolling admissions process, which means that the quicker you apply, the better chance you'll have to gain one of the remaining coveted incubator spots. This Kickstarter cohort will start on September 1st, 2020. So to learn more about the LeanMastery Incubator Kickstarter cohort and apply, visit leanmastery.co/Kickstarter. Act quick, don't miss out on this. Get your applications in today. We'll help you get ready for your next Kickstarter campaign. So that wraps up this week's Founders Forum episode. Thank you all for watching, and we look forward to helping you be successful in pursuing your startup dreams by building Lean.
Steven, if I could just add one last comment, and that would be that if you're not, if you just have a startup that's not going to use Kickstarter, that's okay too. We have our normal application process for incubator members, and they can apply, of course, also at www.leanmastery.co, and you'll find links below this episode on posting where you can apply. So just wanted to add that, Steven.